Okay, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. The other day I posted on my story that I was going to answer the Q&As from last time on Instagram on my YouTube to go a little bit more in detail. So with that being said, let's get through the best questions. I'll give this video like 10 minutes max, so let's see how many answer I can answer in 10 minutes. Okay. First of all, a very common question is the best supplements for athletes. Interesting question. I think that the most important thing for athletes is to actually dial in your nutrition and to realize that supplements should never substitute for nutrition or nutritional needs. With that being said, if your nutrition is dialed in, there's a couple supplements that I would recommend. Number one would be creatine. There's no reason for you not to take creatine. Every athlete should be taking creatine. As a matter of fact, probably every human should take creatine, has shown to be so beneficial for even your mental well-being, Alzheimer even. So even if you're not an athlete, you should probably be taking creatine. Secondly, especially for athletes, I think just a simple protein supplement could supplement, your nutritional needs. Just like I said, first, first priority should actually be to make sure that you eat enough protein from your nutrition. But with that being said, it's just hard sometimes to actually get that in. So a protein supplement will be a go-to. I think that also magnesium is a good one for sleep, to prevent muscle cramps as well, and then some type of caffeine. I prefer black coffee because I think it's just one of the best forms. I like to stay away from energy drinks and all that. So caffeine has also shown obviously to improve performance. So I think those four would be the my top four of supplements. Obviously, there's other ones, but I think that will be the top four. Secondly, best exercise for speed. Shocking answer here. Something fast, right? So many athletes are looking to become faster, and faster within sports means just it means more than just sprinting, right? Obviously, sprinting or actual velocity is what most people want to increase. So therefore, we need to do just a lot of sprinting. Now, being fast in sports, like in field sports, for example, or sports like basketball, rugby, American football, it's mostly about that first step, quickness, right? So there's a couple things that we can do, and I like to divide my speed into two different types of speed. We have acceleration and we have top speed. Okay, things for acceleration that I like are things like resisted sprints, resisted acceleration, so like sled sprints, also broad jumps, kneeling broad jumps, have kneeling starts. Just making the acceleration a little bit longer, making sure that we actually have to apply a lot of force to these first couple steps in acceleration. So obviously, sled sprints do that. Have kneeling sprints do that as well, and then just switch a position. So we can do it laterally, we can do it, you know, regular, starting from a push-up position, those type of things. Now, secondly, for longer speed, higher velocity, I like to do things like depth jumps, hurdle jumps, obviously sprinting, um, longer distances. Um, anything that requires very short ground contact time is probably ideal. A lot of bounding, single leg bounding, those type of things are ideal for longer velocity. So I think if you want to increase your speed in your sport, it's also important for you to realize what type of speed you're lacking and then mainly try to focus on that and those type of qualities. Okay. What else we got? Um, Mindset control on nervousness and anxiety pre-game. Right. So honestly, it's something that I also used to struggle with a lot as an athlete. I used to get really nervous for training or for games, even though I knew that I put the work in. So one thing that I had to dial in as an athlete, and something that I'm still doing until this day, is actually having the same routine on game days. And I'm pretty extreme in this. I don't think anyone needs to be that extreme with it, but I always make sure that I nap before my games. I make sure that I eat the same thing because I know it makes me feel good for the games. I make sure that I have my coffee before my games at the same time, more or less before my games. I make sure that my warm up, my mobility work before my games is the same. And just being locked in on this routine, making sure that this routine is the same time after time after time after time, it just makes sure that it takes away this anxiety. Because if you start guessing before your games and you don't have this structure, you don't have this routine, that is when I found most athletes are getting nervous. And don't get it wrong, being nervous is not necessarily a bad thing. Like some nerves will actually help you perform better. It's just a matter of fact of how you steer those nerves into the right direction, right? So performance anxiety, if you do put in the work and you have the routines dialed in, I think that will make a major difference. Now, if your anxiety comes from not putting in the work, then that kind of speaks for itself. That you just need to work harder, make sure that you're actually prepared for your games and that you feel good about that. But most athletes that have this performance anxiety already put in the work. So with that being said, I think routines will be the go-to with that. Okay. Next one. How can I increase elasticity? So you can absolutely increase elasticity and you can increase you know how fast you're able to interact with the floor. But with that being said, it's also important that there's two types of athletes, and some athletes are just naturally more elastic than other athletes. However, I do think it's important to work on it if you're not, you know, naturally an elastic type of athlete. So again, this kind of goes hand in hand with training for the high velocity speed sprinting, like I just talked about. Things that I like to do, any type of pogo hops, right? Like really try to increase stiffness from the ankles up. Um, being able to interact with the ground really, really fast. So again, depth jumps, hurdle jumps, bounding, a lot of sprint work will help you as well. Um, being able to produce forces quickly, being able to get to that triple extension very rapidly. So any types of like Olympic lifts, obviously I like a lot. Some resisted jumps are great, resisted sprints. But the most important thing is that you're able to interact with the floor very rapidly. Okay. Then let's see what type of other questions we got. There's a lot of the same type of questions I get most often. So let's see. How much should athletes rest between sets? This things gets tricky all the time. Okay, very good question. So it's important to know if you do certain exercises what the goal is of that exercise. For example, if you do speed work, right? Then the goal is maximum speed. Same for jumping. If you do jump work, the goal is that you go with maximum intensity. So with these type of things, it's important that you're fully rested before you do the next set. And the last thing that we want to do in these situations is to do the exercises while we are fatigued. The main thing is that we're fresh and that we're able to perform at maximum intensity. So therefore, we need to rest basically as much as we physically need to, right? In general, I would say for sprinting, for example, rest times would be about a minute per 10 meters that you sprint as a general rule of thumb. So if you do like a 50-meter sprint, somewhere around 4 or 5 minutes, same for strength work, max strength work. So the lower the reps and the higher the intensity, the more rest you will need. If you're doing like some hypertrophy work, or like higher volume work, lower intensity, like mobility work as well, accessory work, the rest times really don't need to be that long. Like somewhere 30 seconds to a minute will be sufficient before your next set. But like I said, the main thing is that you actually know what the purpose is of the exercises that you're doing, so that you can also adjust your resting time to that. Um, how often do you take deload weeks? Okay, that's also a really good one. Deload weeks. I will say this: most athletes will not really need deload weeks. What they need is a good structured training that actually allows for proper recovery. However, I like to deload my athletes probably every 12 weeks if we're really training hard, and if not, maybe every 16 weeks. So every 3 months, 4 months, I like to do like an actual deload week, rest week, active recovery week, whatsoever. But again, it really depends on the needs of the athlete. It depends on how hard the trainings are. It depends on how the athlete is recovering from the training. And most importantly, it's important that your training is structured in a way where every single week you have time to adapt and every single week you have time to recover. So if every Monday you feel completely dead, then you don't need a deload week. You need a proper training structure, right? And your training should be structured in that way that you can actually keep training week after week after week. Obviously, it's good to take a deload week at times, but like I said, most athletes don't really need it that often. Okay, let's do one more. Are one rep maxes necessary? No, one rep maxes are not necessary. However, what I do think is necessary is to push yourself within low rep ranges. So like 2 reps, three reps. I don't really push athletes too often to a one rep max because of the risks that go with it. Obviously, if I'm there, if it's like an in person training, I will push them to a one rep max, you know, once every so often. But the main thing is to just really push strength levels to the maximum intensity. So if that means 3 reps and the 3 rep is like, absolute failure, then I'm completely fine with that. We don't really need 1 rep maxes. We can just calculate off 2 rep maxes, 3 rep maxes. Really, any type of rep of any um, max reps, we can just calculate the 1 rep max. So 1 rep max are not necessarily have a lot of risks, but if the athlete is experienced and if the athlete is comfortable with doing the 1 rep max, then I'm completely fine with it, especially if they have a spotter. Okay, so that will be it for today. I will do this again next week. I'll just post another Q&A. I think it's a little bit easier to actually explain this the questions and the answers. In the YouTube videos, I can be a little bit more detailed and give you guys a little bit more information. So I'll catch you guys in the next video.